Hey guys, this is miicrow here. I think I've discovered something that has made me come to the conclusion that everyone's been playing the game wrong, and I want to explain why. The idea behind this is that the round shields now and any shield that you use in the game have passive effects that work on both weapons, even uh, while you have an SNS or while you have a flail equipped, and these passive effects have gotten buffed in the recent times. The Enchanted Ward is a possible effect to get on here. You can get conditioning effects on here, albeit it has to be an elemental based conditioning. You can get health on certain shields, albeit it's illegal, and you can get weapon perks from flail and on SNS on those shields as well. So if you head over here to the forge, you can look up mithril round shields and you can see all of these perks that you can get. Some of them that are noteworthy, you can get refreshing, so this is really good for healers. You can get your classic weapon perks if they're a flail based weapon perk. This is going to count as an armor value. If it's an SNS based weapon perk, it's going to count as the weapon value, which is noteworthy. You can get, I've already talked about conditioning, and you can get Enchanted Ward. Enchanted Ward makes this really, really interesting because we've actually come to a point now where if you're using a shield, that armor class that you're going to be losing from going a shield, even light and medium, will be made up for by the perks that you're going to be adding. So what do I mean by this? I mean, you can get a shield with basically flame conditioning, enchanted ward, and refreshing, like from a healer perspective, and you're going to be more tanky with that and have extra benefits because you pick up a free refreshing, you pick up that shield aggression, albeit that only works while you have the shield out. Everything else works while you have your actual life staff out, and you just overall become more effective. That flame conditioning, that enchanted ward will work while you have your life staff out too, and because you gain those perks, that's able to offset the damage that you're going to be losing from going those perks. So if I look here at this new world calculator, I basically picked out a few things that are noteworthy here. This value on the far right here, this is what you would have with featherweight. If you have this setup where you have a shield, then you have to drop one illegal piece of that dungeon gear, but for that, you only lose 3% of your effective HP, and for that you pick up a enchanted ward, which is like roughly 2 to 2.5% effective HP boost, which already basically makes up for the fact that you lost stuff. You pick up a conditioning, which is going to boost your survivability a lot, and you get to pick up a refreshing, which means that you could add an extra defensive perk to your armor, and then you just become even more tanky, right? So basically, we're at a point now where if you run this round shield, and this works the same without even featherweight too, but if you run this like round shield based setup, you become more tanky as a healer or as any class really, than not using that shield, because you pick up 3 additional perk slots, and those perk slots make up for the fact that you're picking or taking on increased weight from using that round shield itself. So that is like kind of interesting. So going into here for like some things that are kind of interesting to talk about in terms of weapon perks that you can run for these, I picked out like what I would run from like a healer perspective potentially. Barrage is a good way to kind of disengage a clump. There's a perk called Accelerated Barrage, which gives you haste upon landing. I find this perk to be, or this to be a little bit clumsy because there's a decent startup animation, but it is a way to disengage. You have a grit during it for certain classes. I don't believe you have grit during it for light, so you could get staggered out of this, so it's not like ideal in my opinion, but if you pop stone form, you have a way to disengage with this. Warding Bludge is super strong if you have an ally with you, so if you're with an ally that's kind of defending you, you pop this Warding Bludge. What it's going to do is it's going to give you a 50% armor boost for 3 hits, which is relatively a small effect. But the main thing here that's really interesting is this Best Friends effect, which gives you a 10% damage absorption increase and an empower for you and your ally. So this damage absorption increase is the equivalent of basically having a whole new set of gems, which is why this is super powerful, and it will allow you to be more tanky, as well as you have other passives on here that are useful, like Reinforced Vitality is going to increase your maximum HP by 25% of your physical armor. So this is like an extra 2 to 300 HP pickup, which is nice. A Vortex, the actual haste effect works now too, so you could also pop a Vortex. If you press with Advantage procs and your Vortex procs, you're basically at haste cap alone. You can use this in combination to heal eyes a little bit, get a decent heal off a Mending Vortex if you decide to take that perk. You get cleansed of all CC effects, you get to be immune to all CC effects, pop your stone form and literally just walk away from everyone, and they won't be able to catch you with basically any single build in the game. They could try to catch up to you, but if you, like with Leaping Strike, but if you have stone form up, they're not going to be able to really do anything about that. So that's something that's like interesting from a flail side, like introduction of flail and why flail is like relatively good as a defensive tool. There are some other like niche things that you could go as well, like you could go smite or eruption. I think these are a little bit too offensive for what healers normally run. A trip is interesting, but if you go trip, you'd have to cut one of these defensive perks, and then at that point, it's more like an offense's defense situation where you might not be getting as much value as you want, but you should be able to do decent damage with this flail-based setup. The other thing that's interesting, which will do even more damage in a flail-based setup because of the new gems and how they work, is you can go sword and shield as a secondary. The interesting thing here is you can go for Defender's Resolve. Defender's Resolve gives you 50% damage reduction. So if you look at this graph where you see like this 1162, that effectively is going to go to near 2000 if you run this perk. And if you have it on shield, then it's going to go to 1.5k. So I guess it's going to go to like 1.5, 1.6k for either one that you run this perk. So you're going to increase your effectiveness in being tanky by a pretty significant amount. Like you're going to be like 8% more tanky when you pop that. But I think that the more important thing with it is if you run a perk on the shield called Accelerated Resolve, you gain a 35% movement speed bonus and your incoming healing increases by 14% for 6 seconds. So you imagine someone dives you, you put a sacred down on your feet, maybe you orb yourself, maybe throw a beacon down if you want to be really, really defensive, like if there's a mob coming. You switch to your SNS, you pop Accelerated Resolve, you are not dying like super easily there. On top of that like additional heal that you're getting, people don't usually run VGs in that group, so it's likely not going to get stripped. You have recuperation, which is going to increase incoming healing and regeneration by 10%. So you're basically just not going to very easily die when you go for that setup. You have Shield Rush 2, applies a weaken, applies a slow, a good way to get out. You can go for Shield Bash to try to stun people, or you can go for Leaping Strike to try to disengage and kind of try to get out of dodge relatively quickly. All of those kind of work. If you get a hit on someone, you're going to get that haste up. So it's a weird situation where you basically could be like more of a battle healer sort of thing rather than just like hey, this guy's running at me, I need to run. Like that's like kind of the way that healer's always been built. You run a rapier, you run a life staff, you just run immediately when you see someone within 5 to 10 feet of you. If you're a better healer, you maybe wait for them to have to heavily commit to you before you run. But the idea behind this is there's spots right now where you can't run. For example, Bun, my point healer for dropouts, has an average of like 10 to 12 deaths per war at this point, not throwing Bun under the bus completely, but like he is literally being targeted by 5 to 10 people. At that point, Bun like could be like more of a pseudo tank and go for this sort of role. We have other healers pocket Bun while Bun's being dove because there's no way Bun's going to run away from 5 to 10 people. And he might still die, but he might live a little bit longer would be the idea. So there's like, it's like a different way to build healer that I think is not a lot of people have explored. It's also interesting for a lot of other classes because if you're running a class that doesn't have a shield, you could just throw a shield on and you'll inherently get more value. For example, Greatsword Hatchet is a build that some people run right now that does just a good amount of damage, and the hatchet helps you live a bit longer. But you could, instead of doing that, go for Greatsword SNS within the same spec, and then you could run this shield, and you would just be defensively more in a better spot than you would be than if you ran a hatchet, if that makes sense. So just kind of a weird thing that I found there that I thought would be interesting for you guys to share. This wasn't really possible before this patch because you weren't able to get Enchanted Ward until this very recent patch on a shield. And now that you can get Enchanted Ward on a shield, you can effectively just be kind of unstoppable. It is also noteworthy that like shields are like relatively easy to roll. They always have that like kind of third perk. You can just roll for 2 perks, and then you have a 10% chance to actually hit what you want, which is super nice. The gear score doesn't really matter at all, but your effects from your perks here will be affected by gear score. So you just want to get to above like 690, and then you'll be set pretty much with this like passive effect. You don't really have to worry about the armor values at all because you won't be using that shield that much, and they're just relatively cheap to roll, and they just give good effects. The shield aggression perk and like the kite shields perk that gives a refreshing, noteworthy that those only work while you have, well, the refreshing one you have to have something equipped, so it will work, but it's like it's not worth the cost of going for a kite shield. I looked into seeing if there are any round shields that accidentally were given this kite shield tag, because it turns out there were kite shields that are accidentally given this round shield tag, and those do not exist, so there's not like an illegal perk there that you can just go that like effectively is super strong. But also noteworthy, you can get these shields relatively easily if you open up your OPR crates. They have like a good chance of dropping there too, so there's a chance that you'll get one from OPR crates if you have a bunch of those stockpiled. Personally, I'm not using those until they buff them a little bit more. I think that at some point they'll decide that you can use your dark matter to upgrade your OPR base gear. And once they do that, then I'm gonna be opening up those OPR crates, but I'm still holding on to those for a bit longer. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if I'm cooking way too much here, and it's impossible for a healer to go flail or for a healer to go SNS, or if you guys think that there is a possibility that we'll get to a point where every single class is effectively trying to run a shield because a shield makes you more tanky, makes you better from an offense point of view, and just overall gives you more benefits than having other things. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next video.